Welcome to NewsBeacon, your trusted source for breaking headlines, global insights, and sharp analysis from around the world. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Trade tensions between the United States and Canada, two of the world's closest allies and trading partners, erupted suddenly and dramatically, sending shockwaves through both nations' economies and political landscapes. For decades, the US-Canada border had symbolized not just geographic proximity, but a deep economic partnership built on trust, cooperation, and mutual benefit. But in 2018, that relationship was put to the test in a way few could have predicted. The spark came when the Trump administration imposed steep tariffs on steel and aluminum imports, citing national security concerns. The move was abrupt and sweeping, targeting not only rivals, but also long-standing allies. The tariffs, 25% on steel and 10% on aluminum, were justified under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act, a rarely used provision that allows the president to restrict imports deemed a threat to national security. This decision, a cornerstone of the America First policy, was intended to protect U.S. industries and jobs from what the administration described as unfair foreign competition. But for Canada, America's largest trading partner and a country with deeply integrated supply chains, the announcement came as a shock. Canadian officials and business leaders were blindsided, struggling to understand why their close ally would suddenly treat them as a potential threat. Canadian leaders quickly condemned the tariffs, calling them both economically damaging and politically insulting. They pointed to decades of close cooperation, shared defense commitments, and integrated industries as evidence that Canada was not just a trading partner, but a trusted friend. The idea that Canadian metals could somehow threaten U.S. security was, in their view, not only unfounded, but deeply hurtful. The suggestion that Canadian steel and aluminum posed a national security risk to the United States was widely seen as absurd, straining a partnership that had weathered wars, recessions, and political changes. The tariffs threatened to disrupt billions of dollars in cross-border trade, putting jobs and livelihoods at risk on both sides. Ottawa's initial disbelief quickly turned to resolve. Canadian officials, business leaders, and workers united in their determination not to be bullied or intimidated. They vowed to defend Canadian interests, protect their industries, and stand up for the rules-based international trading system. Canadian leaders argued that the tariffs violated international trade rules, specifically those of the World Trade Organization and the North American Free Trade Agreement. They warned that the measures would not only hurt Canadian workers, but also disrupt American businesses that relied on Canadian materials, ultimately harming workers and consumers on both sides of the border. Despite mounting criticism from allies and industry groups, the U.S. administration remained undeterred. Officials insisted that the tough stance was necessary to revive American manufacturing and ensure national security, even if it meant risking long-standing alliances and economic partnerships. Ironically, the tariffs risked raising costs for U.S. manufacturers, especially in industries like automotive and construction that depend on affordable steel and aluminum. As prices climbed and uncertainty spread, many began to question whether the policy would ultimately harm the very industries it was meant to protect, setting the stage for a prolonged and bitter trade dispute between two of North America's closest neighbors. When the United States imposed tariffs on Canadian goods, Canada didn't simply voice its disapproval or issue diplomatic statements, it took decisive action. Rather than backing down or escalating with harsh rhetoric, Canada chose a path of calculated retaliation, signaling to both its own citizens and the world that it would stand up for its economic interests. The Canadian government swiftly announced a series of tariffs on a carefully curated list of American products. These weren't random choices, each item was selected with precision, targeting goods produced in regions of the United States that held significant political influence. The goal was clear: to create economic pressure in key states and districts, making American lawmakers feel the impact back home. Among the targeted products were iconic American staples: Kentucky bourbon, Florida orange juice, and ketchup from the Midwest. These goods weren't just symbols of American culture, they were economic lifelines for specific communities. By focusing on such recognizable items, Canada ensured that its message would resonate not only in Washington, but also in the heartlands of America. The strategy was to turn the pain of tariffs into political pressure. By hitting products with deep regional roots, Canada hoped to mobilize American farmers, factory workers, and business owners, encouraging them to lobby their representatives to reconsider the trade dispute. The idea was simple: if those most affected by the tariffs spoke out, the U.S. administration might be forced to rethink its approach. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau stood firm, declaring that Canada would not be bullied or pushed around. He emphasized that Canada's response would be measured and proportional, matching U.S. tariffs dollar for dollar. Trudeau's message was one of resilience and unity, rallying Canadians to support their government's stand in defense of national interests. By framing its actions as a proportional defense rather than an act of aggression, Canada positioned itself as a responsible actor on the world stage. The government made it clear that it sought fair trade, not escalation, and that its countermeasures were designed to protect Canadian jobs and industries. The impact of these counter-tariffs soon became apparent. American farmers and manufacturers, especially those reliant on exports to Canada, began to feel the strain. Idle farm equipment, slowing production lines, and unsold goods piling up at docks painted a stark picture of the real-world consequences of a trade war. As the economic pain spread, domestic backlash in the United States intensified. Business owners, industry leaders, and workers voiced their frustration at protests and congressional hearings, questioning whether the administration's tariff strategy was worth the cost. The growing dissent highlighted a crucial truth. In a global economy, trade wars rarely have clear winners, and the fallout can be felt on both sides of the border. President Trump's response to Canada's retaliation was swift and personal. He publicly attacked Prime Minister Trudeau, framing the dispute as a betrayal rather than a policy disagreement. Trump's narrative cast Canada's actions as defiance against his authority, fueling his political base. This personalized approach to foreign policy prioritized loyalty and respect over traditional diplomacy. Allies were left uncertain as Trump's unpredictable reactions strained relationships. The fallout made diplomatic solutions harder, putting Republican lawmakers in a bind. Meanwhile, Americans in affected industries worried about real economic harm. Trump's rhetoric energized supporters but complicated an already complex economic issue. The dispute became less about trade and more about political theater. Let's break down tariffs in the simplest way possible. A tariff is basically a tax that a government places on goods coming into the country from abroad. When a product is imported, the government charges an extra fee, which is the tariff. This fee is usually paid by the importer, but it often ends up affecting the price that consumers pay in stores. Tariffs have been used for centuries as a tool for governments to control trade, protect local industries, and sometimes to raise revenue. For example, imagine the US government decides to impose a 25% tariff on steel imported from Canada. This means that for every $100 worth of Canadian steel, an extra $25 is added as a tax. As a result, Canadian steel becomes more expensive for American companies that need to buy it. This price hike can make it harder for Canadian steelmakers to compete in the US market, and it can also increase costs for American businesses that rely on steel for their products. The main idea behind tariffs is to make foreign goods costlier, so that American-made products look more attractive by comparison. When imported items are more expensive, shoppers are more likely to choose products made in the US. This is supposed to help American companies sell more, keep factories busy, and support local jobs. It's a way for the government to encourage people to buy local by making imports less appealing. In theory, this approach should give a boost to domestic industries. More demand for American-made goods can lead to more production, which means more jobs for American workers. Supporters of tariffs argue that this helps protect important industries from foreign competition and keeps the economy strong. However, there's another side to the story. Many US manufacturers depend on imported materials like steel or electronics to make their products. When tariffs raise the cost of these materials, companies often have to pay more to produce the same goods. These higher costs usually get passed on to consumers in the form of higher prices at the store. So, while tariffs might help some industries, they can also make everyday items more expensive for everyone. Tariffs can also spark retaliation from other countries. For instance, when the US put tariffs on Canadian steel, Canada responded by placing its own tariffs on American products like food, clothing, and household goods. This back and forth can quickly escalate, affecting a wide range of industries and making international trade more complicated and costly. This cycle of tariffs and retaliation can end up hurting businesses and workers on both sides of the border. Factories may close, jobs can be lost, and prices for everyday goods can rise. What started as a way to protect local jobs can sometimes backfire, causing more harm than good. In the end, tariffs create both winners and losers. Some industries might benefit, but others suffer. Economists often point out that the overall impact of tariffs is usually negative, especially when trade wars break out and countries keep raising tariffs against each other. Trade wars, which are a series of escalating tariffs between countries, rarely have clear winners. Instead, they tend to disrupt economies, slow down global trade, and create uncertainty for businesses and consumers alike. The recent US-Canada dispute is a perfect example of how quickly tariffs can spiral out of control. What starts as a single tax on one product can lead to a chain reaction, affecting jobs, prices, and entire economies on both sides of the border. Understanding tariffs helps us see why trade policy matters to everyone, not just politicians and big companies. President Trump promised tariffs would revive U.S. manufacturing jobs. The idea, make imports expensive, force companies to produce in America, and restore factory employment. But most economists disagree, arguing that tariffs are a blunt tool in a globalized economy. While some industries may benefit, higher input costs and retaliation often lead to net job losses. Data from the tariff period showed no manufacturing boom. In fact, some studies found a net loss of jobs. Many U.S. manufacturers depend on imported parts, so tariffs made them less competitive. The reality: global supply chains are complex, and tariffs disrupt more than they help. Experts say investing in education and technology is a better way to support American workers. Even without foreign competition, automation has transformed manufacturing. Modern factories use robots and automated systems, producing more with fewer workers. The decline in factory jobs is largely due to machines replacing repetitive manual labor. New high-tech factories create fewer jobs, and those require advanced skills. Tariffs can't bring back the assembly line jobs of the past. The real challenge is preparing workers for a future shaped by technology, not trade policy. Political promises to restore old jobs ignore this reality. The focus should be on training and education for high-tech roles. Automation, not outsourcing, is the main force reshaping manufacturing. The tariff debate highlights a troubling trend: the politicization of economic data. Instead of serving as a neutral ground, statistics are now wielded as political weapons. Leaders tout good numbers as proof of success and dismiss bad ones as fake news. This undermines public trust and makes it hard to hold officials accountable. The Trump administration claimed a manufacturing renaissance, even as official data showed stagnation. Attacking the credibility of agencies like the Bureau of Labor Statistics sows confusion. When facts are up for debate, rational policy discussions break down. The war on facts weakens our ability to solve real problems. The firing of government experts over inconvenient data set a dangerous precedent. When President Trump dismissed the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, it sent a chilling message to all federal statisticians. These agencies are meant to be independent, providing unbiased information for sound policymaking. Political interference threatens the integrity of all government data, turning it into propaganda. Economists and former officials warned this undermines evidence-based decisions. Businesses, the Federal Reserve, and Congress all rely on accurate data. Compromised statistics can destabilize the economy and erode public trust. Attacking experts for reporting facts damages democracy and is hard to repair. Trust in official economic data is essential for a stable society. People rely on accurate numbers to make major life decisions, starting businesses, buying homes, changing jobs. If data is manipulated for politics, everyone is left in the dark, fueling anxiety and poor choices. Financial markets depend on credible statistics. Any hint of manipulation can trigger panic and recession. The U.S. is a global benchmark for reliable information. Compromising that trust risks economic chaos. Protecting statistical agencies from political interference is a national priority, not a partisan issue. The tariff conflict and attacks on experts show why facts must remain above political debate. Preserving trust in data is vital for informed policy and economic stability. Our shared reality depends on it.